When you feel the need to be kind to yourself, what do you do? Hi, I'm Warren, the rector here at St. Columba's. Glad you could join me for my message of the day. I think a great way to be kind to ourselves is to cultivate a sense of sympathy for ourselves, to understand who we are, where we've come from, to understand why we might have done what we've done in the past. There are parts of our lives which we might feel embarrassed about, which might bewilder us, which we might feel ashamed about, to actually come to a sympathy about those parts of our lives, our past, and heading towards being able to forgive ourselves. I want to talk about cultivating sympathy for ourselves today, and next week I'm going to talk about learning to forgive those parts of our lives that bewilder us and perhaps shame us. It's true that for all of us, there are parts of our lives in the past that are troubling. Failures we regret, we might say things like, what was I thinking when or I'm not going to be that person anymore, I don't like being that person, or I'm starting again, or something. And these are all good in themselves, but there's a lack of sympathy in them. It's sort of like a rejection of who we were, what we did, and actually by rejecting those parts of our past, in a way we're still rejecting parts of who we are now, how we got there, so to speak. Self-sympathy, as I have been taught it, and how I have discovered it, is the recognition that at the time, whenever it was that we might feel ashamed, whatever we did that we might feel ashamed about or bewildered about, we actually did the best we could under the circumstances for who we were right then and there. We might not have been back then who we are now. We might be tempted to say, if only I could have my time again, if only I could go back knowing what I know now back then. And of course that shows us what's really happening. We are who we are now because of what happened in the past. And so a sympathy for the past is to try and understand it. We might discover that given where we have come from, what we knew back then, and what we did isn't quite the failure we think it is. It might be something we're really bewildered about. It might be something that we're ashamed of. But it might not be quite the failure that we think it is, because we start to encounter who we are or who we were back then, where we came from, what made us tick. What were the full range of possibilities that we had to offer the situation we were in? There might have been much less than we think we might have now. That kind of sympathy, that kind of understanding, to try and understand who we are, it unlocks what might seem difficult for us to face now. And we can do it in a non-judgmental way, just to try and step back and think, now, let's have a look at this. What really did I have? What resources did I have to bring to that situation at that time? And we bring a genuine desire to understand ourselves. And as we learn to cultivate this self-sympathy, it can be surprising how liberating it can be. Rather than harsh judgment, it is the quest to understand ourselves. The flow on from this is immense, because there's a direct link between being able to be sympathetic to our own situation and being sympathetic to other people, to be judging ourselves less and not being the harsh critic of others. The two are directly linked. And we can get from one to the other through one or the other, so we can start to learn a self-sympathy. And actually that can open us to having a more genuine sympathy for the predicament of other people, to understand what they have brought to their life right at this moment, and true, to help them grow beyond it, but not to be the harsh critic. Next week I'm going to talk about how this leads to being able to forgive ourselves, because if we can't forgive ourselves, we'll never be able to accept who we are right now. Thanks for joining me.